Hello, my name is Nicola Cicchetti, and I am the Adult Services Librarian at the Fairfax Library in Marin County. And I'm here today to talk about a few books that I loved. Some are old and some are new. And there are some common themes of love, friendship, grief, and also the act of writing. So, the very first book that I want to talk about today is Before the Fall. So, this is by Noah Hawley. And the quote from the first page is pretty interesting. Everyone has their path, the choices they've made. How any two people end up in the same place at the same time is a mystery. You get on an elevator with a dozen strangers. You ride a bus. You wait in line for the bathroom. It happens every day. To try and predict the places we'll go and the people we'll meet would be pointless. So, there's a private plane leaving from Martha's Vineyard. There's two wealthy families, there's the plane staff, and then there's a local painter. And then 16 minutes later, all of them have vanished except for the local painter and the son of one of the wealthy families. And in the crash, the painter managed to dislocate his shoulder. So he needs to swim 10 miles with the boy in tow and make it from Martha's Vineyard to the shoreline of Manhattan, which he does. And at first, he's considered a total hero. And then after time, the media needs a villain. So people start to ask questions. Why was the impoverished painter on the plane? Was he having an affair with the media mogul's wife? Why was one of the men on the plane almost about to be indicted for laundering billions of dollars? Why was the other man coming under legal scrutiny for illegal tactics to get news stories? And then, out of all of this, the little boy becomes a billionaire. So there's lots of questions, and there's lots of ways that this can go. So what happened, really, in those 16 minutes before the crash? And the next book I'd like to talk about is Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. This is her debut novel as a psychological thriller. What would you do if your life was nothing like what your friends thought it was? What would you do if they started to ask questions and that was a bad thing for you because then your life would really be in danger? Grace and Jack seem to have the most perfect marriage. According to their friends. Grace has a little sister named Millie. Millie has Down syndrome, and Grace is a selfless provider for her. Jack is a wealthy man who buys the perfect house for the three of them. Or is it the perfect house? After a perfectly executed dinner party, there's a new couple that's introduced into the circle of friends. And she is a little smarter than the others, and she's got some questions, some dangerous questions, like, why did they marry so late in life? Why does Grace never have a cell phone? Why does she never have anything in her purse at all? Why is she never allowed to be out in public without Jack? So, everything changed on the wedding night. Jack is a lawyer who has never lost a case. What will happen when the truth behind the perfect marriage is revealed? And then the next book is also about love. This is Astonish Me by Maggie Shipstead. It is also a debut novel. This one is the main character, Joan, has fallen in love with both ballet and the top Soviet ballet dancer, Arslan, and neither one of them loves her back. In addition to this complicated love situation, Joan has a friend from high school named Jacob who will love her more than she can ever possibly love him back. Arslan, the Soviet dancer, chooses Joan to help him defect from the Soviet. And when he is performing in Canada, he, much to the surprise of everyone, asked Joan to get the getaway car to pick him up, drive him across the border, and bring him to her apartment in Chelsea, where they hole up and they make love and they avoid the press. And eventually he has to return to dancing in his new home country, whereupon he dumps Joan. And that's when she starts to question why she's a dancer at all. She realizes that she doesn't really have the talent. She's just, a cog in the wheel, part of the assembly line. She's always performing and never actually making anything. And I've got a quote that actually describes that perfectly. So, in low moments, she returns to the question, asking herself why he did this to her, why he had come from Russia to torment her with her own limitations. Her more talented roommate, Elaine, gets asked to do a dance with Arslan. It's actually a modern dance, it's not even ballet. And Joan begs her, please don't sleep with him, just be a friend and don't do that. Will Elaine be able to keep her promise? And will Joan be able to give up her love of ballet? And will Joan end up breaking Jacob's heart even more than Arslan broke hers? These are many questions that you can read to find out. And you end up being astonished. So the next book that I wanted to bring to your attention is Writers and Lovers by Lily King. So this is a book about a writer named Casey Peabody. She's 31 years old, and she has just lost her mother. Her mother went to Chile, and out of all the group of friends that went, she's the only one that doesn't make it back. Something terrible has happened. And Casey has to go to an artist residency that she was accepted into. And there, she immediately meets a guy and falls in love and then gets her heart viciously broken. So she comes back to Harvard Square and she ends up waiting tables and writing, and none of her friends are still an artist. She's the only one that's still doing it. So she's also under a mountain of debt. When she went to Spain, she let all of her loans default. And so she just has trouble even getting through the day. Sometimes even just the morning, she feels bees in her body as anxiety, and she's prone to crying jags during the day in public. So she's got a lot of problems. But then her friend Muriel brings her to a writer's party. It's actually a book opening, and she meets two writers. One of them is the author of the book, and the other is an emerging artist like herself. Silas is the younger, more fun one. He's got a chipped tooth and some dark hooded eyes, and he's very sexy to her, but he immediately disappears. And then Oscar is the older, more established writer, and when he comes to eat at her restaurant, she immediately falls in love with his two boys. So she has a choice to make. Is she going to be with the more adventurous, fun one that understands what she's going through when she has writer's block? Or is she going to be with the one that gives her the sense of family that she misses and craves so desperately? So that's a really good book too. And then the next book I wanted to talk about was Truth and Beauty, which is a memoir by Anne Patchett about her friend Lucy Greeley, who is also a writer. Death is something that Lucy always beats. At least that's what Anne believes. Lucy has beat childhood cancer and all the subsequent surgeries that were especially gruesome. From the very first day that Lucy and Anne meet, Lucy pitches herself into Anne's arms like a softball and claims a stake on her chest. And the two of them become fast best friends, no matter what. They begin to acquire fame. They're, at first they're just hanging out in bars, and they're sharing ideas, and they're commiserating how hard it is to be a writer. But eventually, over time, they gain fame and fellowships and awards, and they become, they acquire what it is that they wanted to acquire, which is fame and recognition. But Lucy will never be able to have people stop gawking at her. So because of her childhood cancer, she has a collapsed jaw, and all the 38 subsequent surgeries that she attempted to reconstruct her jaw were unsuccessful. She has people staring at her in the streets, and she thinks that she'll never be able to find love, and that nobody will love her because of her face. And one surgery in particular took a part of her thigh bone and put it in her jaw and left her unable to walk properly for the rest of her life. Anne will go across the country to save Lucy. Every time she has a breakup, she will hold her in her arms. Finally, Lucy finds the love story of her dreams, but it's not safe. Will Anne be able to hold her in her arms, or will she let her go? And then the next book is one that I read on, it was an ebook, and it's called To Rise Again at a Decent Hour by Joshua Ferris. And he's written a number of books that I've enjoyed. So the main character, Paul C. O'Rourke, is an insomniac dentist. He has recently broken up with his office assistant because he discovered that she has flaws. He also cannot understand why the simple act of rubbing lotion into her hands will give her pleasure. He doesn't understand why anybody derives pleasure from simple things like drinks with friends or going to the movies. He just doesn't get it because he is completely obsessed with death. He's also totally annoyed that his patients never floss, and yet he is a chronic smoker. He is a man of a lot of contradictions. He's an atheist who's always falling in love with women that come from big Catholic or Jewish families, and he loves their families to the point where it's creepy. In the midst of all this, he gets his identity stolen, and there's somebody who built a fake website for his dental practice, and at first it looks very nice, very professional. He's finally getting his name out there. And then if you start to read closely, there's all these weird religious references. And at first they seem like they come from the Bible or this or that. And then you realize this really doesn't come from anything that you've ever read before. And he realizes that his identity has been stolen by a religious nut job. How is he going to deal with this? How is he going to fight back? As he starts to grapple with this, his online, self and his personal, real self become blurred. He really doesn't know the difference. Everybody that he works with thinks he's losing his mind. Is he going to come out and find out why it is that he can't sleep at night? Why it is that he can't have any real connections? Is he going to look to his past to be able to step forward into the future? So, great book. And then the next book is called A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman. This is a Swedish book. It's translated from Swedish. And Ove is a misanthrope, just like Paul C. O'Rourke was in the last book. He is grumpy, he's an old man, and he's antisocial to the extreme. And he has a tendency to inspect the neighborhood every morning. So he has to kick things to make sure that they're still solid, and he has to tear down flyers for things he doesn't agree with, and he's always ranting and raving at his neighbors. And he's just a grumpy old man. His biggest problem is that he's trying to kill himself, and nobody will stop knocking on his door. So he'll get the perfect hook and screw it in the ceiling, and the rope will break, and somebody will be pounding on his door. So nobody's going to let him die in peace. And one day, a family moves in, and they back into his mailbox, and they crush it. And that family will not leave him alone after that. He also has a stray cat that decides to adopt him. Is he ever going to learn to stop hating his neighbors and looking down on them? Is he going to let the cat stay? Is he ever going to grapple with his own grief so that he can live again? These are great questions for this book. So then the next book is a funny little book called Wake Up, Sir by Jonathan Ames. And Alan has a motto. His motto is live and don't learn. So Alan Blair wears Brooks Brothers suits and ties to yoga and meditation. You can't really trust anything he says, and his personal assistant Jeeves, whom he calls his valet, may or may not be real or imaginary. We don't know. He lives with his aunt and uncle because his roommate kicked him out. He realizes that things are getting a little tense with his aunt and uncle, so he decides to hit the road. And it's not even 24 hours before he gets himself involved in a booze-fueled debacle in which he decides to call the number of a woman soliciting sex because he thinks, oh, interesting, a woman's actually soliciting sex, not thinking that maybe it's a man impersonating her. So that doesn't end well when her boyfriend shows up. So he hits the road again, and he ends up going to an artist colony where he discovers that he has a nose fetish. What else will he discover there, along with all the other eccentrics that he's writing with? And then this book, Wayward, by Dana Spiotta, I think it's best described by this quote. Samantha, who's a 53-year-old mother, always she liked to imagine herself as subtly different from everyone else, enjoying the tension and mystique of being ordinary on the surface, but with a radical, original interior life. So, no one tells Sam the truth because she's going to freak out. Her mother may or may not be dying. Sam will never know. Her daughter refuses to return her texts because they're just too crazy to even deal with. And then her husband's too distracted by making smoothies to listen to what Sam has to say. So Sam has a pretty radical solution to all of this. She decides to buy a house. A crumbling ruin of a house downtown in a low-income area. There she can have a room of her own where she can face the fact that Trump got elected, her body's changing, and people that say something online, they're activists. In real life, they're something totally different. She's also considers women that are aging gracefully, which she doesn't really believe that's a thing. And then there's the women who fight with all their might with bizarre hormones and weightlifting and strange fasting diets. She's skeptical, that's for sure. And then one night, she can't sleep because she's having menopause. She can't sleep. She's having insomnia. She wanders the streets of her new neighborhood. It's about 3 a.m. And there she witnesses the murder of a young, black, unarmed man by the police. And she wonders, is there anything she can do? The whole reality of all of her questions about the current political and economic and frightening, white privilege issues that she has been grappling with come to a head. And she needs to figure out whether she's going to make real change in her life, whether the changes in her body are going to become changes that she makes in her life. And then the final two talks that I'm doing have been adapted from Joni Richards Bodart. So Jane, Marcy, Luna, and TJ are all tech coworkers who meet every Friday night, and they have a girls' night where they drink a bunch of wine and they gossip. And one night they decide, we're going to make a list of the perfect man, top 10 qualities. And, some of them are totally chaste, like he makes me laugh, or he makes good money, or he would make a good father, or something like that. And then some of them are not so chaste. They're pretty raunchy. They're pretty inappropriate for the workplace. Somehow, this list gets leaked by one of them, who decides to leak it to the company newsletter after a few too many beers. And that newsletter ends up going viral. They end up on Good Morning America. All of it is great fun. They're not getting in trouble. And then one of them ends up dead. So, obviously, somebody has an issue with their top 10 qualities for the perfect man. And that person's not going to rest until they pay. And then the final talk is The Perfect Husband by Lisa Gardner. And this is also adapted from a talk by Joni, Bodart. Teresa Matthews thought that she was being rescued at the age of 17 when Jim said he would marry her. She was being rescued from a broken home where her father would get drunk and beat her mother. And she was so perfect and well-behaved. She really deserved this. She really thought it was a good thing. And 5 years later, she's on the run. She is running because her ex-husband turned out to be an incredible monster, and he has just killed 2 guards in maximum security prison in under 2 minutes, and he's escaped. So she's running with her daughter, who's 4 years old, and she needs to protect herself, and she knows nobody can do it except for this man named JT. JT is a drunk. He used to be the best of the best, but now he's just in the middle of a tequila bender that he does every year. And she comes to him and says, here's $100,000. I need you to save my life. I need you to train me to fight my ex-husband. He agrees, and what the two of them did not know what was in store for them, because an absolute monster was on their path after that. So definitely recommend reading that to find out what happened. Thank you so much for being with me today, and I appreciate all of your comments and feedback. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.